Good evening to you all, and welcome to the July 26 work session of the Garner Town Council. As most all of you know, these work sessions are conducted a little differently than our regular business meetings. There are a few votes taken, and there'll be items to be discussed and reports to be made, but we won't have any public hearings this evening. So with that being said, I will ask Ms. Ashley Knotts if she will call the roll, please.
Mayor Marshburn,
I'm present.
Mayor Pro Tem Vance,
Here.
Councilmember Dellinger,
Here.
Councilmember Behringer, here. Councilmember Matthews,
Here.
Councilmember Singleton.
Here.
Okay, thank you so much. And the next item, council, is the adoption of the agenda. You have it before you there. Is there a motion that we approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, thank you. Motion properly made and seconded. All in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And it is so ordered. Okay. So, the first item of business, we will hear from our Parks and Recs Cultural Resource Director, Ms. Maria Munoz Blanco. It's good to see you this evening, and we look forward to hearing from you.
All right. Well, Mayor, council members, good evening. Thank you for allowing us to make this presentation to you tonight. We're excited about the 2021 Parks Bond Program, and we're pleased to bring you this update, as well as quite a few questions that we need your direction. So the purpose of the presentation, again, is to brief you on the status and potential next steps for the implementation of the 2021 Park Bond projects. We want to get your direction on the potential use of a method called Construction Manager at Risk for Jurgen Park, and we also want to get your direction as it relates to the location, budget, and approach for park rehabilitation projects, which was one of the categories of the bond program. The next slide is sort of a summary, and you know this information, but I just wanted to make sure that if we have anyone in the audience watching us on Facebook or YouTube that don't know enough about the bond program, that they know that in 2021 in November, voters approved by a 75% margin $35.5 million for park projects. And at the time, it was estimated that the funds will be allocated as shown in the graphic: $21 million for the development of 2 new parks, Jurgen and Meadowbrook, $10 million for design and development of greenways, with the priority project being the South Garner Greenway extension, $2.5 million for rehabilitation or repair projects of existing parks, and $2 million for future land acquisition. And in this presentation, we're going to address 3 of those 4 categories. So starting with new park development, this slide is again a refresher of the work that has been completed to date on both Jurgen and Meadowbrook. The town council approved the master plan for both parks a little over a year ago in May of 2021. I think that was my first meeting here with the council, so I remember it clearly. Then the phasing of the projects was approved again by the council at a special call meeting in January of this year. And for both projects, we have reached the 30% construction document milestone. Since we last met, we have submitted a grant application to the North Carolina Parks and Recreation Trust Fund for the Jurgen Park project. We hope to hear about that later in September. It's a competitive grant, so again, we're hopeful. It's an amazing project, so we think we have some really good opportunities. And then we are conducting some additional geotechnical study on the Meadowbrook property. The next slide, sort of a reminder of the cost estimates for both projects. And the one thing that I wanted to highlight and kind of bring to your attention, it could be good news, could be no news, is that we do have some potential savings that could occur in the Jurgen project with the road changes for the Jurgen Spine Road. It was designed as a collector street, and as you know, as part of your decision making in January, it has been shifted to an internal park road, and the design standards for those are going to be different, so there could be some potential savings in that project, and the cost estimates are based on it being a collector. Again, there's also the opportunity for a lower cost alternative for a sewer connection One of the big ticket items of phase one was the development of a pump station, and that could change if there is a lower alternative for sewer connection. So that said, the escalating construction costs could certainly negate any and all savings that we could realize from these. And for Meadowbrook, again, we're doing some additional geotechnical study, and that may have some impact on the cost, so we'll bring those back to you at a later date. I mentioned earlier this sort of approach of a construction manager at risk, and we wanted to introduce this option of using this process as an alternative to the traditional low bid process for construction. The state of North Carolina allows for local governments to pursue the CMAR process, and the services of a general contractor in CMAR are procured by an RFQ, request for qualifications based on competence, qualifications of this type of professional services, and then you negotiate a fee after selecting the firm. The CMAR then becomes an integral member of a project team, alongside with the architect or design team, as well as town staff. And their key responsibilities are to integrate the design and construction during the design phase, and to deliver this this thing called the guaranteed maximum price, which is at some point in the design process, they will guarantee this is the cost of this project, and they will commit to delivering for that price or less. Unless, in my experience, I've never seen that, so, but miracles do happen. And then in the construction phase, they sort of act like a general contractor, selecting the trades and whatever competitive process has to be utilized as part of the procurement process. There is a cost associated with CMAR. It's not a free service. And one of the main benefits is that you get no surprises in the bid process. That gets you, once you have completed your design, you go for competitive bids. CMAR sort of gets you to get that design. You look a lot at constructability. You look at material availability issues. You look at scheduling. So it's sort of, it's not quite value engineering, but it gets your project to prevent delays and having to go back for bid again in the marketplace. At least traditionally, that has been the benefit of CMAR. I think with the construction world being so volatile lately, there might be some changes, but it is, again, it's a different approach than low bid. It sort of guarantees a little bit more reliance in the bidding process in a way. So our next steps for this, for Jürgen, for our new parks, we want to get your direction whether we should pursue construction manager at risk. If that is your guidance to us, we'll put together an RFQ and go out to the streets and get that done, and then we'll come back to you with in the future for an agenda item to authorize a contract with a construction manager at risk. In August, we actually have to bring back to you so we can continue the design process for Jürgen. We'll bring back a contract for your authorization with McAdams to get us to 100% construction documents. We have traditionally had Jürgen and Meadowbrook on the same path. We're going to be sort of splitting them a little bit, in part because we have pending findings of geotechnical study for Meadowbrook that may impact how we proceed with that project. So we'll come back again, bringing you some information on the most recent study with a recommendation, and then kind of get the project back on getting us to 100% construction documents. The next category in our bond program was the rehabilitation of existing parks, and the priorities that were identified by the council were an inclusive playground, a splash pad or spray ground, and we sometimes use the word interchangeably, so if you hear me say either one, it's the same. And also repairs that we were looking at the tennis courts at both Creech and South Garner. As you know, they're in fairly poor condition, and we do get citizen feedback of wanting them to be in a more playable condition. And then we have also identified and are bringing to you Centennial Park as a potential priority repair project. Now for the inclusive playground and splash pad, one of the things that we need your guidance tonight or in the very near future is the optimal location to make these projects happen. And what we did, we evaluated our existing park sites based on the factors that are listed on your slide. We looked at whether the park had available land or space where we could put a playground and a splash pad. We also looked whether the access to the park was convenient for the community. We looked at the parking situation because we know that it will impact how customers enjoy the park. We also looked at the potential impact, good or bad, of existing activities at the location. And were there any other conditions that would be beneficial or detrimental for that particular location to be the optimal site? With that, we are recommending as a staff White Deer Park as the location for the inclusive playground on the west side, which is the side where the nature center is, and the splash pad on the east side, which has an open field. There's 2 picnic shelters, 3, as well as part of the greenway, which is on that side. And I'm gonna go to the next slide to sort of walk you through our rationale for this selection. So when we looked for the inclusive playground, there is the area at the Nature Center where there was an original playground called the Nature Playground, was originally installed when the park opened. You certainly know the location of White Deer. It's convenient. It's sort of centrally located within Garner. It's off Aversboro Road. It's a well-known location, so I think community members will find it easy to get there. There are 72 parking spaces on the west side. And again, one of the conditions that we looked at is that this would replace a playground that has been on the perform list for several years. Many of the components have deteriorated beyond usability, so they have been removed. So we think it's important to, again, sort of bring this playground in a new iteration. It doesn't have to be a duplication of what was there, but still sort of maintaining the connection to nature that is such a beautiful character of White Deer Park. There's a picnic shelter in close proximity, which makes it, again, convenient for parents, for, take a break from the sun and so on and so forth. It will be adjacent to our newly installed sensory garden that Katie has been working hard on this past year. And we also think that the adjacent green space may offer us the opportunity to develop some really special calm areas to serve neurodiverse children. For the splash pad, we looked at the opposite side. There's, again, plentiful parking. We have about 80 spaces. There's a restroom building in the middle of that area, so we think it's very convenient, again, for a splash pad. Kids will be wet, and they will need to be taken care of. There are 3 picnic shelters. There's an existing playground. And one of the things that we find interesting about this site, there's, in addition to the parking and drive-in, there's also greenway access through the Timber Drive trailhead, which will make it fairly convenient for people who live in those many neighborhoods that are along Timber Drive to get to that part of the park. And from a logistical perspective, locating the splash pad on the east side will limit the impact on the Nature Center weekend rentals, because we do think that there is going to be events that happen on the weekends at the Nature Center. Weekend hours are sort of peak hours for a splash pad use. So we think by splitting them, this will make it, again, a much more logic approach to maintaining and minimizing the impact on existing activities at the facility. Now, the other thing that we wanted to sort of get your feedback about, and this is so that we can draft the right specifications as we move forward with this project, is the sort of the style, the type of splash pad that would be desirable as our first project. Option A is those very colorful above-ground metal structures. What I've learned from some of my colleagues in other municipalities that have this type of splash pad is that they require a bit more maintenance and regular cleaning of the actual metal parts because of the minerals that are in the water. So that is one thing that will have to be taken care of. And then again, when they don't have water, they're much more visible and they're not as attractive. Again, their fun part is when they have the water on. Option B is really more streamlined. It's a more minimal look that almost disappears when the water is off in the winter months, so it would not have that visual impact when it's not in use. And again, both are wonderful options. We just wanted to get from you a sense of which direction to go into. And then I should have sort of shown this to you a little bit earlier. I didn't order my slides as logically. But I wanted to show you some of the components that we want to see in an inclusive playground. It used to be that having a ramp and a solid surface were the options that came to mind when developing an inclusive playground. I think nowadays there's many more components that really give children with varying abilities the ability or the opportunity to play together, which is really important, or even play with an adult caretaker or their parent. For example, in this slide, the swing set that's in the middle of the picture, it's not just suitable for a small child or a toddler, but it also has the high back that would work for an older child with low muscle tone. And one of the sort of important components, I think, of inclusive playgrounds is that we think of the children, but we also want to think of the parents. I had a wonderful conversation with a mom the other day that was talking to me about how difficult it is for her. She walks with braces to walk on mulch, and how she sometimes has to take them off so that she can really sort of get to the point of where their kids are playing. So we think, again, thinking of all those elements will be an important part of how we get a design ready for the inclusive playground. So what our next steps as it comes to the playground and the splash pad is we want, again, your direction on the location, whether it's approving by Deer Park as the option, or if you prefer an alternative location. Your general direction on this design or type of the splash pad, and then we'll prepare some agenda items in forthcoming meetings to authorize contracts to get the design process moving forward. The other thing that we're going to do as part of this, we want to make sure that White Deer Park remains eligible for grants. And one of the requirements of the Part F grants is that there be a master plan that's up to date. And again, the master plan for White Deer was done in the early part of the 2000s. And we'll have some community engagement to make sure that this inclusive playground can be part of an updated master plan for White Deer Park. Now, other sort of potential rehabilitation projects. We know the condition of the tennis courts at South Garner and Creech Road Park, so I didn't prepare a slide for those. But those are certainly priority projects that we want to make sure that we take care of them. We also wanted to add Centennial Park to the priority list for two reasons. One is the existing playground is again in deteriorated condition, and I believe also has been in the perform list for quite a few years. I'm looking at my colleague Forrest.
It is.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you, Forrest. And the other part that we need to address is that there is no sidewalk or any kind of easy access from the paved parking area of Bellerose for the playground area or for the picnic shelter and bathrooms in that particular park. So we hope that to make this a combined project and address those two issues. So again, next steps for this, we have to get your direction on whether this is a viable alternative. And pending the above, you'll be seeing in the near future an agenda item to begin with the design process. Quick update on the South Garner Greenway extension. That was the priority identified in the 2021 park bond. A feasibility study for this particular leg of the Greenway was completed in 2019, and we contracted with McAdams in June of 2022 to revise that feasibility study and update Buffalo Road as the preferred alignment for this extension. So we'll be, as our next step, bringing to you a presentation on this report on the Buffalo Road alignment, and then sort of move forward with getting the next step of making this extension a reality, which is to get it designed. So those will be the forthcoming steps for the South Garner Greenway extension. Now this is a quick slide. These are estimated numbers, a preliminary approach to the spending of the 2021 bond on the various projects. It's a lot of money. But these are, again, all wonderful projects that I think our community will certainly be delighted to see realized. Last of my presentation, this is not specific to the bond program, but because it is a capital project, wanted to bring to you the concept of a playground at the Garner Recreation Center. A playground was not included in the master plan for what was then called the Indoor Recreation Center, but the GRC team has identified this as a highly desired amenity to be used for our campers, for families who visit the GRC for league games, and other activities. We worked with a playground manufacturer to sort of get a preliminary estimate, get a sense of what this would cost, where it could be, what kind of space we're looking at. The preliminary estimates are in the $400,000 to $450,000 range. And the image on this slide gives you a general idea of what space we're talking about and the impact it would have on the multi-purpose field. And staff believes that the current uses of the field could still continue with the addition of a playground. So it would be more of an addition versus anything that would take away from the way we use the field right now. Now, I mentioned this is not a bond project, so we're not asking you for money. We wanted to sort of present to you the concept of how we would like to approach this as a grant-funded project, and both have sensitive timelines. That's why we have added this. One of the major manufacturers of playground equipment has a grant program that they are rolling out in partnership with the North Carolina Recreation and Park Association. It's called the Game Time Healthy Play Initiative. It has a deadline of interest. We have to submit a letter of interest by next week. And then the main reason for this is actually the Part F Accessibility for Parks grant. Last year, the General Assembly allocated $10 million for this Accessibility for Parks grants to be distributed to local governments across the state. And the way the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources has decided to distribute it is through a special grant program through the Part F program. One good thing about this, it has a 5-to-1 match. So for example, for a $400,000 project, we would be asking for a $375,000 grant and match that with $75,000 through the Game Time Healthy Play Initiative. And again, one of the things that Game Time and the NCRPA are doing is try to figure out how to support the Part F grants with the National Demonstration Site Healthy Play Initiative grants that they're going to offer. Now, to be competitive in a Part F Accessibility for Parks application, we would need to revise the GRC master plan. And this, again, gives us an opportunity for community engagement. So our next step in this process is to, again, get your direction on whether you think pursuing this path for a grant-funded playground is something that we should be looking at. And then we would then proceed with the community engagement process to revise the master plan and bring it to you, which is a requirement of the Part F grant, in time for the November deadline. And so, all that, I know it's a lot of information. In summary, to wrap this up, this is what we're asking for your feedback and direction, whether to pursue the use of the CMAR Construction Manager at Risk option for Yeargan Park, locating the inclusive playground and splash pad at White Deer, and your guidance on the general type of a splash pad, whether to include Centennial Playground and ADA access as the fourth rehabilitation project along with the tennis courts, and then the concept of pursuing the revised plan and grant submittals for the Garner Recreation Center and Playground. And with that, I thank you for your time and for listening to this very lengthy presentation, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. You did cover a lot of ground and a lot of information. I'm going to ask just one quick question up front and then give council an opportunity to come in and ask questions as well. Would I be correct in supposing that the CMAR option, this would be the first time that we have used this particular type service in our town. Is that right?
It is my understanding that yes, sir.
Yes, it is. It is.
Intriguing process, and sounds different, but yeah, okay. So, Council, you can use what page you want to in terms of questions, but she's kind of laid them out by bullet points there in terms of the presentation. So, I will start with Mr. Singleton to my left. I will ask each council member, if you will, to sort of be aware of your time so we can get everybody an opportunity to ask questions. So, Mr. Singleton, you can go first, if you will.
Got lots of questions and lots of comments, so I'll go through some and divvy them up and come back around 3 or 4 times. CMAR is used by other municipalities and governments. I think the school system, that's what they use now. Is that
City of Raleigh
City of
uses it
Raleigh
on their transit, and then the bus station, they on Pool Road, they use it for that.
okay? So this is a approach, I think, we've learned the hard way, the lowest bid is not always the best bid. Okay. Regards to, I have no trouble with the CMAR option. One concern I have, I added everything up in here and it exceeds what we have approved. That's a concern. I think we really need to seriously look at the phasing decision from Meadowbrook and I think we dramatically need to dial that back. I think we just all realize with cost increases and things that are out of our control from the supply side, from getting good contractors, that we need to focus on one park, and Meadowbrook it needs to be dialed back to a minimum. What concerns me about this is being at almost $500,000 over. I know we're looking at grants and this, that, and the other, but already learning a hard lesson on the increase on Fire Station 5. I mean, we don't have any buffer. I know there's contingency built into this, but that's not enough. We learned a hard lesson from 2013, and if we make that same mistake again, we ought to have our butt kicked and all of us ought to be run off of here. I really think we need to scale back Meadowbrook. I've got ideas I won't get to right this minute, but and just don't spend all that money. Just let it sit there, and then when this that we thought cost 500 is going to cost 650, you've got it. And if the most expensive project by far is Jurgen, if you're going to need another $2 million or $1.5 million, you got it. So I just will start here and on that part with Meadowbrook, and I think that phasing decision needs to be reevaluated, and because we got to get the numbers down there. That's not going to work. I like a lot of other things y'all have done with I'll just ask one question about the playground and splash pad. I like what you've done. That's good. There is the what I think was intended to be an inclusive playground at Garner Road Park, and it is somewhat, and it is not somewhat. Is there any way to rehab that to make that more inclusive, or do y'all have any thoughts on that?
We actually had a quick conversation with one of the playground developers, and they talked to us about finding more details about the condition of that playground, because you can always you can add the rubber surface after the years into a playground's life. We just have to find a little bit more about its condition, and that is the kind of project that, again, it's probably 100. I don't know the square footage of that, but there is, it's 100, 150, give or take, to add a rubber surface to a playground.
But that would make that particular playground even more inclusive than what it is. Okay. I had to drive by that day on my way back in from being down east early in the morning, and people out there playing on it. I just want to make sure, as far as I knew, it still had the mulch as a surface. I just wanted to check on that before I asked the question tonight. I'll let someone else go.
Thank you, Mr. Singleton. I'm going to,
Mr. Mayor, can I make a suggestion for the good of council that we go through these in order and do a round, because then our questions don't get we can all be talking about the same thing at the same time. So I think if we went through each of these, it would be smoother.
yes, you're talking about the order as is listed here.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, yeah, we can start with construction to CMAR. Mr. Singleton has stated his opinion on that. I'll go to Ms. Behringer for comments.
Thorough, and I really, and in words that we can understand, so that's been good. But with a low bid and waiting and waiting and waiting.
Okay. Mr. Matthews?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I agree with my colleagues on Seymour. I think that's an excellent opportunity to go there. And I would agree with Mr. Singleton that maybe we need to focus more on one park versus trying to dilute that funding right now for Meadowbrook, and with costs being what they are. And I like the idea on the playground and splash pads. I think they will be well used, and the inclusive playground, let's make sure this is a really nice one with everything. It'll be a feather in their cap. And so I'm pretty much on the same line with everybody else on this, Mr. Mayor.
And we can come back to those, but we'll get everybody's comments on Seymour. Mr. Vance?
Yep, I'm in agreement with my fellow council that the CMAR are probably a better benefit for us learning from the past. In particularly, I'm speaking specifically about the rec center. I think that the CMAR will be an advantage for us to use going forward with this particular project for Jurgen Park.
Okay, Mr. Dellinger?
A few questions. So the Seymour and the costs associated with that, I know we approved 3 positions to oversee bond projects. Does this replace that personnel capacity that we had put in place, or is this in addition to the positions that we had authorized according to the bond?
Mr. Dellinger, it would be in addition to. So in a CMAR type project, you would typically have a project manager who you can either hire from a private firm or have on staff at a town or city who sort of oversees the project from the town perspective, but CMAR would work hand in hand with that project manager to make sure that from a contract standpoint, from a construction standpoint, from hiring the subs, from a budget standpoint, all those things happen in a competitive way, but also in a timely way so that we're moving forward in these projects. So you'll see in a lot of projects, you'll have a CMAR who's a contractor work with a project manager to build and construct a lot of the capital projects like Jurgen.
Cost for that would come from the bond funds as well?
Yes, it would be part of the bond projects, the funding for that.
In addition to the fund, so what is the process right now going on the hiring of those positions that we?
The project manager position specifically, we're still recruiting for those. We've had limited numbers of applicants for those, but their engineering staff did have 2 interviews last week, and so we're continuing to recruit for those 2 positions. One's a senior project manager, and one's a regular level or project manager.
The other question I had related to the Jurgen and Meadowbrook, and I'm in agreement that given the limited funds, focusing on one is probably a good idea, but I have some questions on the development of North Garner. You mentioned the road realignment change, and I know that there's some plan, or the property is adjacent. Well, I don't know what stage it's in, but I know it's related. And so I'm curious as to what impact that has on access from that property to Creech Road and these what's the road connectivity plan for that part of Garner? Because I also know there's a strong need for additional ball fields in the town, not just for current needs, but also future needs and whatever changes happen downtown over the next 10 years. And growing from 33 to 53,000 people, that need for fields will increase, and we don't have many opportunities for ball fields specifically. So can someone outline what the plan is for North Garner and what impacts that might have on art? I know Mr. Singleton's mentioned many years ago they were approved but not built, and so I want to get an idea for what the North Garner development situation looks like.
It's do you have?
Well, I know as far as Creech Road Park that we are in not agreement, I guess agreement with the school system to build more fields at that park. I think 2 more. We built 1. It has capacity to have 2 more ball fields there. I guess there wasn't a timeline put on it, but that's something we'd have to go back and look at.
There's current proposed development that is looking at land that would be near the Jurgen Park. with the decision by council to not want the road in the park to be the collector road, that collector is still on the transportation plan. So it's to the west of the Jurgen Park. So anyone that develops the tracks to the west of Jurgen Park will be required to build a collector road as far north as their property extends. There's also a desire on the transportation plan to complete an east-west connector to get to Creech Road if that opportunity presents itself. So I think there's a current proposal is looking at ways to try to connect what would be a future connector road going north over to Creech Road to relieve traffic. My understanding is that any of the options that are currently being looked at would not be in the way of any future fields where they were originally identified with the Creech Road joint use agreement with Wake County.
I don't want to eliminate rare opportunities for field development and park development.
We think at a high level, this is sort of a best of all worlds scenario of getting the traffic relief and still preserving the opportunity for future park development.
Okay, and that may be a good lead-in if council's inclined to sort of follow the steps in the agenda, which would be, and Gray's already mentioned this, new park next steps, comments there, Jurgen Park, Meadowbrook Park. Ms. Behringer, I'll start with you.
Exciting and overwhelming. I would support doing one at a time. Jurgen Park is, it already has a lot going for it, and so, and it's more visible. Would be approval from the citizens at this point with the higher rate of approval.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Mr. Matthews.
I'd still go along with the Jurgen Park, is make that a priority and really double our efforts there and not dilute the pot we got to work with. So I think it would be a good business decision, and I think it's something everybody would support.
I just interject. Is that sort of consistent with you as a park director and your parks people in terms of where the initial emphasis would be on Jurgen Park?
Absolutely. I think Jurgen Park is a little bit ahead in design, and since we have some geotechnical questions about Meadowbrook, we can certainly pause that design, sort of get to a point of Jurgen when we really have a sort of more solid knowledge of guaranteed maximum price, and then we don't have to restart Meadowbrook design until we get to a point that we're really comfortable with budget. So I think that would be perfectly fine.
Mr. Vance?
I agree with what has been said in reference to the Jurgen Park, moving forward with that one, and just holding on the Meadowbrook Park.
Mr. Dellinger?
In agreement. I do think we might want to look at some very simple things that could be done out at Meadowbrook, trails around, or just very simple stuff. I mean, make it sort of a usable space for folks who live out there, but I think we can, for the
Okay, Mr. Singleton.
Yes, and I'll follow up with that is, if we can take a minimal approach from Meadowbrook, no paving, no utilities, gravel lots, gravel driveway, natural trails, but also you could put in the disc golf because you're going into woods. I don't think we're supposed to cut down a bunch of trees. I think they kind of want to have, so that's something you can add new that we don't have and put it in there and still have. But I would, if we could make that type of approach where people can get into the park and walk with the trails, and if you could get the disc golf in there because it might be a minimal cost, I think that's an approach we may want to look at. I know we did the phasing back earlier this year, but it would be nice to at least let people go there to do something and just have it sitting there. So if there's some minimal approach we can take that could have an impact, I think it would be nice.
Okay, and if I'm following in sequence here, the rehabilitation of existing parks, certainly that was mentioned here at Creech Road and South Garner and also Centennial Park. So that along with the inclusive playground and the splash pad would be good topics to pick up at this time. Mr. Vance, I'll start with you.
I represent inclusive playground and splash pad. That's what we are. I don't have an issue where they are being proposed and how they're being proposed. I would say I'm in favor of moving forward with what you have proposed.
Okay, sir. And I'll come around to Mr. Dellinger.
Yeah, I'm in favor too. You mentioned a revision of the plan that would require community input and engagement for the inclusive playground. I would encourage something similar for the splash pad to get more feedback from the public on what they want it to look like. Some of the other viable locations that you either eliminated or this got preference over.
Sure. So we looked at all our parks, really, kind of a pros and cons. And some were sort of like, take South Garner Park. It is heavily used for ball play. Adding an amenity would sort of become a little bit too much for the park, and particularly because of its access through neighborhoods. So that's one, for example, that we sort of, got to that conclusion. We certainly consider Lake Benson, and I think there's some pervious surface issues there. Plus, it is such a heavily used park that, again, we wanted to make sure that we sort of don't overwhelm one property with a lot of stuff that would just create a lot of traffic and just too many people in one location when we had others. We looked at, oh gosh, I didn't bring my pros and cons list, but we sort of went one by one and kind of evaluated and sort of
Eliminated. We eliminated the Jurgen property for the splash pad kind of early on in the phasing. So that was one area. And then we also, at one point, were considering somewhere near the rec center, the Montague Street, some of the properties we had there, but we'd kind of be cramming it in there, and then, parking could be an issue.
Was it eliminated for the green space? I know we're going to talk later about this grant, but what was the thought about not putting it in sort of the front of the rec center?
Some of this has to do with there's not very much space in front of the rec center and between us and the road, so that would be a very, very tight spot. There's also quite a few sort of utility things there that we didn't necessarily want to disturb. One of the main concerns that we had with adding a splash pad splashes are destinations. Playgrounds, there's multiple ones, so people can always spread out visitation. Splash pads, this will be our first one for a while in Garner, so we thought competition for parking at the GRC would just be not necessarily a good idea with all the activities that we already have there, with leagues and tournaments and all the good stuff that the team is. That was one of our concerns.
I think the idea that, that greenway that is right out there connecting off Timber is a good point as it relates to the splash pad there and where you're proposing. I'll come around to Ms. Behringer.
I'm excited about the splash pad. I think I first brought this up 12 or 14 years ago. So it has been a long time coming, and I'm excited about seeing it. Personally, I like the White Deer Park location, and I like the style of the one that is, when the water's off, you don't know it's there. It kind of lends to the magic of the splash. White Deer Park sounds like a really.
Was on that flat one, the children and even adults can enjoy that. Okay.
Even adults still believe in magic, right?
You got it. Mr. Singleton.
I agree with the splash pad. Again, the inclusive playground, I think we're all in favor of. I would also really encourage us to look at doing more to the semi-inclusive playground, and let's make that inclusive also, because that was the intent of that. And with kids who have special needs, And that's will be a busier park than at Garner Road. Having a quieter place may serve some kids better. So I agree with that. I appreciate you working in the tennis court work that's been talked about and striping it. I think eventually for tennis court and pickleball and your identified Centennial Park, all this sounds like it all needs to be done. I mean, Centennial Park was built in 05, 06. It's got some age on it and shown so. Yeah. You talk about the playground though. You're talking about rehabbing it or just replacing it and getting more up to date.
I think it has to be replaced. It has probably reached the end of its useful life. And I also understand that there used to be some big trees that had to be taken down because of disease. And that sort of allows us to sort of spread it out a little bit better than the way it is currently positioned, closer to the picnic shelter. And it's funny, every time that I go to Centennial, there's somebody in the playground. It's very well used because there's a lot of residential neighborhoods in that area. So.
Good call on making the whatever y'all recommend on that needs to be done.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. The Parks and Rec director down in Fuquay is a good friend of mine, and their splash pad down there, it is a destination. They really use it. He said it's the best thing they ever did, and the kids thoroughly enjoy it. So, but I like the location because they'll be at opposite ends, and it's more of a destination, as you said, and there's more parking there. There won't be the competition at some of the other parks when things are going on, so it'll serve a good purpose. And I would agree with the inclusive playground up in North Garner. Let's put that on the radar, and let's get that.
We'll do some research.
And get that done, and everything pretty much, the tennis courts and all, now's the time, let's get it done. That's what we had planned on, and so I'm just saying, let's move ahead.
Maria, you may have mentioned it, but I may have missed it. Could you give us a brief overview of the kinds of, you indicated that Centennial Park is on the list as needing priority repair. Could you give us an idea of what you're speaking of?
At Centennial Park, there's a playground on the sort of, I like to think it as the upper edge of the park, close to Highway 50, Benson Road. That has been there for quite a bit of time. It's really a taught playground. It's for the younger kids, and it's missing parts. It has the old sort of wood mulch, so it's sort of a rocky terrain, so it does pose some accessibility issues. It does have, again, it's a lovely location. It's fenced in, so it has some separation from the road. There's pluses to that location that I think would work really well. The other part that we want to address, there's a sort of it's kind of like a half cul-de-sac on Bella Rose that was added as a parking area for the playground, because the lower parking, which is primarily used for the soccer fields, it's a little bit of a walk to get to the playground. And if you have kids and you're lugging, cooler or anything that goes with having young children, it's a bit of a walk. So I think making it easier for parents to park in that area and take, a little trail along the shelter. The bathrooms are there. It's a really good spot to again, sort of modernize a well-used playground.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, we'll take another round, Council. We talked some about the inclusive playground, splash pad, obviously. The next item, I don't find it here, but at any rate, I'll go to Ms. Behringer on this one. Did I call you first last time? You did. Okay, I'll move to Mr. Dellinger this time.
No further comment on the splash pad.
Okay, all right.
On the tennis court area, I'm going to beat this to death. Can we, as we develop do work on that area in Creech Road, get sort of site plans and maps for what configurations of those fields would look like, so that it sort of makes sense? We already have two fields, but they're separate, and also matching that up with whatever sort of road improvements, so that we can kind of visualize what the end product would look like. And I don't know if there are existing plans that are lost or around
I have heard
somewhere.
that there were plans, or at least very preliminary plans. I don't know that I have seen them, but we'll dig into old files and see what we can find.
We'll find something.
Yeah.
I saw the joint use agreement not too long ago, but we'll find a plan.
There's quite a bit of space of land between where the tennis courts are and where the field space, the sort of property that belongs to the Wake County School System, there's quite a bit of space between those two, so I think, but we'll look for some existing concepts and bring those back.
Plan at the time included one more field the same size as the current one, and then one that is a slightly smaller field, and I'm not sure, there's probably a designation that goes with those sizes that I don't know, but I know that when we did a schematic design for what's now going to be Jurgen Park years ago in the downtown plan, there was the two additional fields had a location, but one was slightly smaller than the other.
Well, one was, you had a
Baseball,
softball field.
softball.
Then you had a big, more like a baseball field, kind of like North Garner baseball field. Then you had a smaller baseball field. Something, maybe not as small as some of the ones at Garner Baseball, but maybe slightly bigger, like you've got one at South Garner that can be. So that's what was thought about at the time.
Okay, so on the South Garner Greenway extension, who has questions or comments about that? And I believe this indicates the next steps would be to brief council on the Buffalo Road alignment in the next couple of months or in the fall.
As soon as McAdams finishes with her study, that's going to look at sort of where it goes, where it needs curb and gutter, where it can be more of a, a lovely sort of meandering, the impact on the existing tree coverage in that of Buffalo Road, and as well as any sort of easements that are existing and easements that may need to be acquired, because there is quite a bit of right-of-way in some parts of the road. So that's kind of what we have charged them to give us more details on those topics so that we can bring back.
Okay, and I'll go to Mr. Matthews if he has any comments on this.
I think I've pretty much put my 2 cents worth on everything so far. What I haven't, I've
We need
agreed
some
with everybody
feedback
else
on
on.
the.
Mr. Mayor.
Well, I know we do need feedback on the playground at GRC, but anything else? Did we skip something?
No, I was going to just tell Mr. Mayor, I think the list that's on the screen there is the summary of the one specifically that staff was looking for feedback for tonight, and I think that we've gotten down to the last one, as the manager is about to say, that the last one needing feedback was probably the planning study for the playground at Garner Rec Center.
And the grant submittals, we are definitely
Mr. Mayor.
applying for a part-of grant, is that right?
We already did one. Yeah.
Before we go to that point, I would like to ask a question of the Centennial Playground and ADA accessible. What type of material is being considered for the foundation? I know there's mulch out there now. Is the same or?
No, I mean, I think, again, if we really want to consider sort of full accessibility, we would want to be shifting the new playgrounds to have the sort of soft rubber surface, which is typically poured in place. I mean, we'll have to sort of mind the cost, so it might not be overly designed, and we'll have to sort of make sure that sometimes they make them really huge with a lot of sort of little elements here and there that brings the cost up, so we'll want to be tight in where it's used, but again, making sure that there's easy pathways to it, and that if you're, a mom on braces, that you can walk your kids to the swing set. Or to whatever's the element of the playground that you want to bring with you, or that a young person in a wheelchair can enjoy the park too without being like pothole mulch world.
Then the ADA access also includes, I believe, access from the parking lot up to the playground, because there's not a ramp to get there also.
There's nothing, you just have to climb
And that's
up
the ADA part that's included in the numbers that Maria has, is for the accessible route, not anything at the playground itself. But we are not meeting compliance for the accessible route.
Okay, wow, that's interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Okay,
Part of the recommended prioritization.
gotcha. Okay,
Did you get your question answered?
sure did, sir.
All right, good.
Thank you.
Let's see, and focused, I guess, on what Mr. Hodges suggested we needed feedback on. Have we covered everything there? On
The last item, Mr. Mayor.
last bullet.
Was laying on the ground, was propped up against the fence, but it cannot.
Let me make a suggestion, if y'all want to look at a really, really cool playground, that's massive, it's huge, it's inclusive, has a surface at Laurel Hills Park off Edwards Mill Road. Go out there and look at it. I mean, I've been out there and looked at it. Harrison used to play ball in Raleigh, and it's huge. But it is a really cool. I was 21 Sunday. I went out there. I tried to count how many people were out there, parents and kids, and it got so far over, well over 100 that I didn't even stop. I stopped. It was that many people. I said, this is a very large playground now. We're not talking about, we don't have anything in Garner anywhere
Pretty
close
big,
to
yeah, it's
that
pretty
big.
big, yeah.
I mean, it's just like going from here to the front of Town Hall, that far across. It's big. But anyway, that's just one I can think of that if you want to see an inclusive playground that's rather large. But it is, it's a really impressive, that type of facility when you're looking at. I don't think we're looking at one that big by any means, but it's a pretty impressive facility if you want to see an impressive playground.
Okay. Anybody else in general? Go ahead, Mr. Dellinger.
Last thing, just a question on the Greenway. Are we anticipating, or how much participation are we anticipating from the county on our project?
So as far as I know, for our segment, none. The county will have the Swift Creek Greenway. They're developing a master plan right now, and it'll come to Buffalo Road and connect with our segment. I think that is the intent of it, as far as I.
It is, but in addition, and I don't know if it's still available, but in addition, we had previously applied for a pot of money that Wake County had in their parks fund that they were sharing with municipalities who were doing projects that connected to or helped complete one of their projects. We were awarded $250-ish thousand and had to give that back because we couldn't move forward with the project from the 2013 bonds. I'm not certain if that program is still there, but that may be what you or others were thinking about in the past, that they had that pot of money for helping with those projects. Since that time, though, as was stated, with the Swift Creek Greenway taking a new path forward with the county, I don't know if they're going to offer that up for those projects or not.
Wake County prefers to contribute to segments that connect more regionally versus that one, which is more of a, going to our own park.
But they did consider it regional last time because
Yeah.
it was the end of the Lake Wheeler to Lake Benson Greenway. It completed that full thing. So at the criteria of the time, it did meet their criteria for regional connection. We'll just have to see if they're still offering those dollars.
Yes, because I seem to remember we were going through the bond process, that we were setting aside that money with some anticipation that there would be county participation at some level to supplement our funds.
Based on a
So,
different configuration, so I wonder. But we'll see.
I mean, if we could reach out to the county and
Right.
see if they've changed totally, or, I
But
mean,
we
I just,
certainly can reach to the county and see if there's any sort of bucket of funds for matching that kind of project.
Okay, council, anything else for Maria?
Well, in regards to GarnerNC, I want to thank y'all for adding that and putting it in. When I was on the committee, we discussed this. Some of us wanted to put a playground in, some got convinced not to, so that's why it was never there. And once again, we made a mistake. We're going in afterwards and screwing everything up and correcting the mistake that was made earlier on some bad advice. But anyway, thank y'all for doing it, and I think it's appropriate. It's a place to have it. You can't sit there and have camps with kids, and they can be outside and not give them an opportunity to play in something that they may like to play in or play on. So I appreciate y'all doing that. And again, on the numbers, I'm not being ugly or critical. I'm just saying my concern is that everything's budgeted, it's budgeted over, and we need to get budgeted under, because I'm afraid we'll spend the under. And if we don't, if there are options to look at, but I just think we need to try to cut this somewhat, and the easiest place to do it is at Meadowbrook. But again, I think we might need. I think we as a council may need to look at the phasing plans that we approved, because I can remember some of it, and I think we just may have been a little too aggressive. Seeing how the market is now, and that's at the time, I think we thought it was okay, but the way the prices have increased, I think we just need to reevaluate that.
And Mr. Singleton, we would continue to look at the pricing for the projects and keep the council updated on to where we are. Some of the projects that you hear about today are projects that we can move forward with relatively quickly and start getting the designs done and construction done. And we see those as really great opportunities for the community to start seeing the bond dollars at work. And so we would be looking at prioritizing things like splash pads and the inclusive playground and those kind of things, which we can get moving on fairly quickly. A lot of the larger projects, the Jurgens, the Meadowbrooks, the more expensive projects, look at the phasing, look at the opportunity for the pricing and whether or not we needed to manage those timelines and phasings according to what we're seeing as far as cost of contracts and overall construction. So we hear you and understand you on that piece of it. We're watching it too. And although we've shared a lot tonight about the projects and the excitement, as you can see in the energy around them, as we're ready to get started, we're also very mindful of the budget and making sure that we're keeping track of those costs. And we may come back to the council with some other opportunities for, as we start discussions of some of your one-time use money with ARP, there might be some opportunity also to look at supplementing some of those costs as well. And so we'll be bringing that back to council.
Very good. Okay. Did you have any other questions for council?
I think you all gave me good guidance on all of this, so we'll get back to the office right now and start working on this. We're excited. I think these are awesome projects, so we're looking forward to them. Thank you.
You're gonna make them go to the office right now and go to work? I hope not.
Okay.
He's excited.
Thank you. Very good presentation. Okay.
Thanks, sir.
All right, council, let's get back down to earth, I guess, huh? So the next item is the proposed renewal of solid waste contract. This is, we'll hear from Mr. Forrest Jones, our Public Works Director, in regards to this particular item.
And Mayor, do you want to mention the new,
Yeah,
the new action or
there's
approach we're taking for tonight?
Yes. The action is to provide direction to staff on renewing the solid waste services contract with the town's current vendor. There's not a contract to be considered tonight, but we're asking council to weigh in on the recommendation from Jones, right?
Yes, the action that was in the previous agenda was a little too forthright, so yeah, we didn't intend for you to have to make any decisions on that tonight, so you have an edited version in front of you.
Sheet right here, yeah. Mr. Jones.
Good evening, thank you.
Good evening.
Trying to get fired back up on my, I don't want to do that. Is he going to sign in? Sorry about that. Tried to do this ahead of time. Nothing wants to work when you're being watched. And it's going to call me. There we go.
Very good.
So yes, thank you again, Mr. Mayor, members of council, for taking time to hear from us this evening as we talk about our proposed solid waste contract renewal with All-Star Waste. So that's much of what we're here to talk to you tonight about. I will walk back through kind of where we've been in the current period and then talk about some things that are going on in the marketplace today and just seek some of your guidance for us later this evening. So we wanted to kind of provide a snapshot for you of, well, I think many of you are aware about our solid waste in general, just kind of wanted to frame it up about some service data points for us. So currently we have about 11 different trash routes. We've served 2 routes each day, save Tuesday. That is kind of what we refer to as our tan route, which is really out by your White Oak, you're around your new high school. That's much of where that tan route is, where we're seeing a lot of development right now. As of the last report, we're serving just a little over 10,500 homes, and that is for weekly trash collection and yard waste, as well as biweekly recycling. fun facts, there's about 183 folks in town that asked for additional trash can, and roughly 495 looking more recycle rollouts. And just one note, I know if many of you remember when we first went into this recycling rollout container, we were using the 65-gallon containers. We have since switched to 95-gallon containers for both trash and recycling. So we have the largest container available for our residents moving forward, and we did that a number of years ago. Just people were asking for more, so we found it beneficial, and many other communities were kind of doing that shift as well. And then just one other fun fact there for you is we schedule about 11 bulk pickups a month on average throughout the year, and obviously we schedule less of those sometimes during our springtime when we're doing our spring unprepared cleanup. But typically there's roughly 11 folks a month that request use of that service, just to kind of frame up some of that. Couple of things I want to talk to you about this. This is looking back since 2017. Our new setups, as we're looking again kind of at the growth we're experiencing right now. In 2017, you can see we had just a little over 50. 18, we were just a little north of 200. 2019, again, just slightly above 250. 2020, I won't read it all, 350 you can see, but we are seeing substantial growth going on right now in our community. And I think this shows it, and you can see right now where we are in 2022, and this was through June data, so this does not calculate everything we've seen in July, but we are at just slightly above 350 homes, which is a lot to be only halfway through the year when you compare it against where we were last year for a total. The number to its left just a little bit above 400. So that number is continuing to climb, and people are moving to Garner, so good things. Our contract period with All-Star, initially we entered into a contract with them back in 2009. That first period was for a 3-year period, if you remember. Then we did a renewal for 5 years in 2012. We did a second renewal in 2017 for another period of 5 years. And here we are in front of you again today talking about a potential additional renewal in 2022 of this year, and we'll get some feedback from you. And we are looking at proposing a 5-year renewal period. Snapshot of our pricing and kind of where we have. So this chart represents is our current unit prices on the left there, which is what we are paying today. The pricing you see reflected on your right is based on a proposal we have been negotiating with All-Star, which basically reflects a CPI, Consumer Price Index increase. And that is what all of those numbers are based on. And that is a formula we have used historically in our solid waste contracts with All-Star as well as other providers to determine that increase. So that is not something we just arbitrarily went out and picked out of our hat and said, let's go with this. There's a formula that gets there, but it's probably more than we want to talk about tonight because it is a quite tedious process. One thing I'll call your attention to that reflects more than the CPI is our top number there as far as residential garbage. One of the things Wake County has implemented this July was a tipping fee increase per ton on trash at the landfill. This was the first time we've seen a price increase in the county in a good while. I don't think we have had a price increase since All-Star has been providing us service back in 2009. So the CPI increase did not really account for that. It looks at global, it looks at big markets, not just what's going on in Raleigh. So the CPI would really not have covered any compensation or provided any compensation for that tipping fee increase, which is included in these numbers, which is included in All-Star's monthly invoice to us. Again, I kind of got ahead of myself here. When we looked at that $5 per ton increase that's currently in effect now, we only applied it to the residential garbage collection because that is the only place it's impacted. One other point that you're already aware of, as we all are, we're paying more at the pumps when we go. So All-Star came to us a few months ago and said, hey, we need to start looking at a fuel surcharge. We are proposing not to build this automatically into if we were to choose a new contract, to make it part of the contract where it's something we would continue on. Rather, what our hope here is this surcharge would be temporary, and when fuel prices get back to a new normal, and what that new normal will be, and right now we're using $3.40 a gallon kind of as that base, that once it would get back below that, this fuel surcharge would go away. We're hoping this kind of reflects similar to what we did a number of years ago, if you remember when the recycle markets really changed dramatically and we went from disposing of our recycling for free and we were having to pay. So this is kind of the similar process we're hoping will go away here. Look at All-Star's performance a little bit. As you see, monthly average missed pickups throughout. We track this data point. We feel All-Star has provided us outstanding customer service over the entire term of their contract. You see 2009 was a big time for them. That was represented about 3 months in that year. They started in October, and they had averaged about 50 calls a month in their first 3 months, just kind of learning routes. People are very habit forming with their trash. You know, they know the trash person comes at said time on their house, and when obviously a new provider starts, there is some other people are going to run routes in different ways and things. So that we had a lot of interaction with our citizens then. But as you can kind of see, we have steadied out quite a bit. So we're down in the low teens per month, which is what I can tell you from working with a total of 3 contractors in my time with the town. No other provider has matched this level of service. So these other numbers have typically looked 100 or better per month on average, probably what you would see. So I think just an interesting point there to say we're getting good service. And I think when you go back and consider in 2009, we had probably we had slightly over 7,300 homes that we were serving. Today we're serving 10,500, and you hadn't seen that complaint volume tick up with your growth. It's still staying very consistent. So be commended for on that. Talk about why we're here a little bit this evening. As Maria alluded to earlier in some of her presentations, continuity of service is a big thing for us. People really, as I said just a moment ago, really enjoy their trash to be picked up, and they want it gone on their trash day with really no interaction. Their expectation is they roll it out to the curb, I come home and it's gone. And if it's not, we typically hear about that pretty quickly. And any disruption of that service, whether it be for weather-related issues and things, they're relatively forgiving, but only for a brief period of time. Right now, we're in a very, very volatile market. So for us, or at least for me, that is one of the reasons I think is a good reason to consider renewing this option we have in front of you this evening. Going out in the open market brings us a fair amount of uncertainty and a fair amount of risk with where we are. Also, one other thing to consider in that is typically when we would do this, historically we've provided a 3 to 4 month time for someone to get up and running once we give the notice to proceed for a new service level. Right now, we're experiencing this, and I talked with the provider today to make certain I was not, this was still the case. Right now, if you were to go order new trash trucks and things of that nature today and try to outfit to take on a new contract, there is not a good date anyone will give you on when they could get equipment for you. Typically you could get that in probably a 90-day window, pretty easy, 60 to 90-day window. But with supply chain issues and other things, while he wouldn't say you can't get a truck, but I said, what if somebody was trying to go buy 3 or 4 or 5 trucks to start up take on a new contract? He'd say maybe a year. So I think that's just where we are. Proposed rates of what we've looked at with that 2.7% increase, even with that increase, as well as our adjustment for the tipping fees, our rates are still at or below other municipalities similar to our size in Wake County who are contracting out their service. So we have, you know, I think we are still getting a good value if we take this option. High level of service equals fewer complaints, so that's always a positive thing for us as well as our residents. And then finally, which is where we started at in this journey, was this opportunity for renewal does align with town policy as well as past practice. So we've kind of checked to be certain we're not violating any of our own policies, any general statutes, as well as past practice. So it's kind of where a little bit of the getting us there a little faster than normal. Recommendation and next steps from a staff perspective is move forward with renewal of the 5-year contract with the All-Star. And should we get good direction with council on this, we would come back at a future date in the coming months, in August or September, with something for you to officially approve. Again, to our earlier, as alluded to earlier this evening, we're not asking you to make a decision this evening or approve a contract. Finally, third alternative is always to go out and seeking bids for a contract. We think it would take us a couple of months to get that out and up and back and be ready to start talking about a new contract, just recognizing there would need to be a fair amount of flexibility and uncertainty as to when we could actually start that. So we would, should you choose that option, we would need to negotiate an extension with All-Star to fill that void. So that, I thought I had one with questions, but I must have deleted that slide. So this will be a time we'll stop and kind of go back and hear questions and comments from council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. And yeah, I remember when we first negotiated the contract with All-Star. I was fairly new to council then, but at any rate, the provider has served us very well. So I appreciate this presentation. Council, what say you in terms of the proposal here? We're not voting on a contract, but just the direction that he's moving in.
I will say that before this company, All-Star, I remember calling and complaining before All-Star, and there was definitely a tremendous change for the positive with All-Star, and haven't had any issues with them at all. I'm in favor of the moving with renewing the contract with All-Star.
Two questions. One, the diesel surcharge, and how is that assessed? Is it a flat fee we pay, or how is it calculated?
So we're using 340 as the base rate, and anything above 340, we would pay that difference. All-Star is like every business. He tracks how much fuel he uses for us on our accounts each month. And basically, he could provide us, if needed, this is how many gallons we bought and used for Garner trucks in this cycle, and then we would just pay that difference on a monthly basis.
Looking at historical prices, it sort of looks like there's always sort of at historical prices, it looks we're high, but also seems like we'd always be paying sort of a surcharge. I would be in favor of negotiating a little bit higher on that price point. I don't see, it's the cost of doing business when you do business. You know fuel costs, and you've got to adjust, and I'm in favor of supplementing it a little bit, but we don't know what normal is going to be. And if we can save the taxpayers money, I'm in favor of that. So that would be a recommendation. The other question I had on the pricing slide you had.
Yes.
That one. So are these, the proposed unit price, is that for the next year, and then it continues to go up each year of the contract?
Yes, thank you. So I'm sorry I missed that. So what we would propose moving forward would be an annual adjustment, CPI adjustment each year subsequent for this.
Explain the change on the residential with the cost for the county. The only issue I sort of have with that is it becomes a 6% increase. And then over 5 years, it ends up being a 33% increase, which for the rest of the fees on here, it's only 16 because it's at the 2.7. And it seems a slow shift onto the residential customer and cost. And I don't know if it could be spread across, or is this all gonna, you see what I'm saying?
I do, but I'm not 100, I'm still listening.
So I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't, so the yard waste, the bulky waste, the trash, paper recycling, are those services aren't provided to everyone, correct?
That is correct.
So because it ends up getting a lot bigger over that 5 years than the increases for the other stuff. And over time, it's a bigger jump. And so I guess my question is, there's a way to work the numbers so that that increase is pushed into other categories?
We certainly could look at that if that was a direction you wanted to do. I would say for us, we showed it in this way because this was where that impact was felt the most, because that tipping fee is something that will move forward. Whereas with yard waste, the tipping fee for trash or garbage has not been impacted. So we can certainly go back and look at it if that's something that council desires, but this was the cleanest way to show it.
As the residential picks up, as we grow, that cost also increases for us as a town. And their collection ostensibly would actually get simpler over time because the neighborhoods that are being built are smaller, closer together, that kind of thing. So it seems like I guess what percentage of sort of our costs are captured in that residential garbage category?
That last comment for me one more time.
What portion of our contract expenditures are captured in this residential garbage category? Is it 80% of what we pay?
All of those 10,571 homes are impacted by that fee.
Any others that come in?
It's per household,
This is per household per month.
And it comes out of the tax rate, so it's.
And I guess as a percentage of our contract, that cost, what is that for that?
That is the majority of it, and I don't have a breakdown of the percentage. We've not looked at it from that
So that's
lane.
kind of what I'm saying, is like the CPI applied to all of those, these aren't equally distributed costs. A lot of them are captured in this residential, but from what I'm hearing you say, making any adjustments to the others wouldn't be significant enough to make up that difference.
And that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
And I would say one of the things I did look at, so what was our overall increase on the entire contract? If you looked at it maybe in the lane you're looking at, overall, we're talking about a 4.5% roughly increase on the contract from what we're paying today versus proposed rate with that tipping fee.
I got you. All right, thank you.
Ranger, anything? Okay. Mr. Singleton.
Yes, I'm in favor of directing staff to move ahead with the renewal. The service has been excellent compared to what it was at one time. What's not captured in all this? One thing is the residential garbage is every single week. Recycling is every other week. Yard waste is who chooses to put it at the street, which is a small percentage, a small percentage.
But they have to run the route,
They have to run the
just
route.
like everybody was putting it out.
Just they'd run the route with
Yeah.
fuel. The thing that's not mentioned here, that's not listed, is leaf pickup.
Loose leaf, yep.
And that was one of the sticking points with our previous two people in Republican Waste Management. They had as much business picking up leaves as us going out there with rakes and wheelbarrows. It was horrible and inconsistent. And at times, I remember 150 to 200 complaints during that time of the year, as you recall.
I think 250 or 300 was about the
Okay.
top we saw.
Yeah, so, and I remember talking to Mr. Sims about when they knew how bad it was and them doing it and still saying, it was even more than we thought, because they had heard all the stories, and they've done a really good job for the last several years, so let's move forward.
And you brought up a good point. So leaves is included in your yard waste number. It's not specifically called out, but that is all things yard waste. And we did not include necessarily our calls we get on leaf complaints. One of the things we've recognized in the recent years with the growth we're experiencing, and Garner's not unique to this, it is very difficult for a period of about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, to stay on your assigned schedule. And one of the lessons we've learned and we're looking at is how we begin to message about leaf season and collection. For much of November, we're able to stay on target, and matter of fact, ahead of schedule. Typically somewhere between Thanksgiving and Christmas, it shifts, and you were good to make 2 passes where you would normally be scheduled to make 3. And we have some people call us back and say, when am I getting that extra collection made up? But typically, once we get past New Year's, leaves begins to become a distant memory again and goes away for many people. We're trying to do a better job at messaging and setting an expectation for our residents there.
Oh, I agree that All-Star's doing a fantastic job. I can set my clock by the Wednesday morning pickup. I can hear them out there, but they're everywhere and doing a great job. And I certainly agree with your recommendation, sir.
Are you, just a general inquiry, are you hearing anything about the, any issue, continuing market for recyclables, and any potential changes there? From time to time, I'll hear a news report or some documentary about our supply was a foreign country, and we were sending them dirty. Thing you're hearing in that arena?
So no, what I would characterize to you is that market has kind of restabilized, and at the current time, we're not paying any surcharge, and we've not paid that. I don't have the dates in front of me here this evening, so I don't want to mislead you, but we have probably not paid that in 6 to 8 months. We've kind of not been having to pay any surcharge for that. So I think that market where you remember we came in and it talked about anything above a certain rate per ton, we've not had to experience or incur any cost for that. We're back to where we were pre that market disruption.
Stay that way.
That is the plan.
Yeah. Okay, anything else for Mr. Jones? If you will, I guess, sort of give a thumbs up in terms of your approval of the direction we're moving in with the same vendor, and you will we'll bring back a contract for council to look at.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Okay with that, council? Okay.
All right.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for leading in this effort. Okay, item 3 is something we discussed previously. I'm going to recognize our attorney, Ms. Jones, as it relates to appointments and liaison policy that we kicked around some before, and she's made what I think is a good action plan and recommendation, so I'll recognize her at this time.
Thank you. I haven't prepared a formal presentation for tonight, but just to recap a little bit, the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Advisory Committee had looked at its bylaws and had recommended some changes. However, most of things that would normally be in the bylaws are actually in the Parks and Recreation Ordinance. So to change those bylaws would require an ordinance change. This resulted in looking at both the practice of how committee or members are appointed and the overall liaison tradition that's happened where the mayor appoints these. So included in your materials are your existing, in the Garner meeting rules and procedures, what the existing written policy is for appointments, both to internal committees, boards and commissions, and to external groups. And then there is under this committees and boards where it left it somewhat ambiguous because it says the council or the mayor, as appropriate, may establish and appoint members to temporary and standing committees. So what I've done, and we have two tasks before us tonight. One is to give direction on specifically the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, and then also if you wanted to adopt a formal liaison policy that reflects somewhat how the tradition has been and also fleshes out some things, and I offer this as a suggestion for you to debate as you want, but it seemed that the natural term of a liaison assignment would be from when you have your organizing meeting after each election until the next one, or from the time that you get a request for a member of council to serve on an ad hoc committee or a state body or something like Campo, that from the time of that request to the next organizing meeting. And then just to, partially for my own ease and the clerk's ease, to make sure we have the record keeping about how many appointed offices you're holding and what is the form of those appointed offices, because as I put in the supporting materials, as an elected official, you are allowed to have one elected position and one appointed position unless those appointed positions are ex officio, meaning the only reason you're being appointed to that is because you are a council member and your appointment would be concurrent with your council term. That then doesn't violate that dual office holding rule that's in state law. And then again, in this past year, we've encountered the Transparency Act, and whether you might be appointed to a nonprofit who might receive funds or otherwise contract with the town, we need to keep track of those as well. So again, a little bit evolving nature of the status of state law, but also trying to formalize what has been the tradition of council and the mayor's role in making these appointments, and clarifying again the difference between whether the appointment should be for full membership with voting rights or more of a liaison communication, being able to report back to council on what different committees are doing, as well as being a conduit for the public who may have an interest in what different advisory committees, boards, and commissions, the work they're doing and the decisions that they're making. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you might have or on the proposed policy or how to proceed with the Parks and Recreation Ordinance amendments. And just to reiterate what I mentioned before, I believe the role has been more of a liaison role and not a member, a full member role. So if that is how you want to proceed, then I would propose removing that particular subsection from the ordinance and going forward with the other amendments that have been recommended by the committee and placing that on either next week's agenda or the second meeting in August.
So if we agreed with that, would we in essence replace that with, if we approve this, the proposed liaison policy? Or
right, we would take that membership, it's really an option to have a full membership out of the Parks and Recreation Ordinance, but the liaison policy would apply more broadly to all of the typical boards and committees, and in each of those particular bylaws or ordinances, there isn't this specification to have a liaison, but this would be where you would like to have a liaison. And currently, all of the boards and commissions that are internal to the town, there is someone who is specified, a council member that is specified to serve as a liaison to each of those, including the fire rescue board.
Question.
go ahead.
That was quite a presentation. I'm trying to take it all in, but cutting to the chase, basically, if I'm hearing you correctly, if we just continue with the liaison, especially with that one, we'll be consistent across the board, and it'll be business as usual, and the mayor appoints those like we have been doing. So if we just make that a liaison, all of them would be liaison. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Unless you would get a request from, say, an external organization that says we want a council member to be a full member of our board or committee, and then that would go through the appointment process with the Human Relations Committee.
So that's what you presented us tonight. If we just go ahead and make that a liaison, we'll be consistent, and this issue would be over with.
Well, you would have to vote on it at a subsequent
Yeah,
meeting, but yes.
Of course. Okay. Thank you.
I think right now the policy is good, and I think your recommendation is good, to changing the ordinance and making it the liaison consistent with it. I think that everything got tripped up with the ordinance being written the way it was, and so revising that so that Parks and Rec is consistent with the other boards.
Okay, thank you. And Council, I'm sure you're aware, on my page 45 is obviously a chart of the current council member appointments. Everybody's familiar with those. It's a nice reminder there of those. So comments, questions from other council members?
Do we just need do we need to make a motion tonight to recommend that we prefer to stay with the liaison process, and you would recommend deleting the section 1226C in its entirety? But we also will stand by the other amendment suggestions by the Parks and Rec Committee and move forward with those. And also, I think you have formally have us a liaison policy in here that you recommend that we adopt.
If you're satisfied with that policy, certainly you can adopt that tonight, or if you want to tweak any of those things, since this is essentially the first time you're seeing this, I tried to reflect not only what you've been doing in tradition, but also adding some requirements of state law so that we, remain consistent, and it allows me and the town clerk to do our jobs easier by having something that says you have to provide this information.
So, yeah, as I understand it, if you favor it, basically adopt or approve the proposed liaison policy as stated and written on page 47, right?
We can vote on this tonight if we so choose.
Yes.
Does the council member want to weigh in?
Or
on
it
this?
can be put on a subsequent agenda. The Parks and Rec ordinance has to be voted on a subsequent agenda, but you can adopt a policy at any time.
Or you can put it all on a consent agenda, we can do it all at once. That sounds like the clean way, if that's okay
Two
with
separate
everybody.
items
Right.
on consent.
That sounds good to me.
That's a good, clean way to
It's
do
all on
Sounds good to
consent,
me.
it's all taken care of at once. Sounds good.
Probably on the next meeting's consent agenda, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, anything else on that? Thank you so much, Ms. Jones, for your work on that and clarifying and giving us the information we need there for sure, okay? All right, Council, are you ready to move ahead? I see we've been in session since 6 o'clock, not quite 2 hours. We have one other remaining major item, street stub completion policy. I believe Mr. Triesenberg is with us virtually, is that correct?
Yes.
And so, Mr. Triesenberg, we appreciate your work on this. We'll hear from you at this time, sir.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All righty. I appreciate you taking me virtually today as we're in quarantine here at my house through tomorrow. But so far, nothing adverse, so we're in good shape. But yes, coming back to you tonight with the stub completion policy draft in response to Mr. Dellinger's comments and concerns. Last time we sat down with management and the town attorney and tried to come up with what we thought might be the best places to include some of the language that he shared. And I'll go ahead and just share my screen briefly here. So since you've last seen this, the first part was added to the purpose and applicability section, just kind of reiterating how policies work. And I think Ms. Jones kind of pointed this out to a degree last time, that, you know, policies are a little less unwieldy than the UDO. So propose putting here that the town council may amend this policy from time to time upon the discovery of additional safety or quality of life issues not adequately addressed by the existing objective criteria and standards that are otherwise drafted in the policy. So again, just kind of reminding folks that this is something that can be changed with a little more ease as we would potentially move forward. And then the other revision was right here before the exemptions, was just include a statement, and again, kind of a reminder, which is good for everyone involved. Completion does not preclude recommendations to implement proactive traffic calming measures to reinforce desired traffic speeds. And I think this is something that we as staff are taking a much harder look at now, and hopefully you will be seeing a little more analysis from both engineering and planning regarding these kinds of proactive traffic calming measures in some of the proposals that you see coming forward. So those are the two major changes that were made between this meeting and the last meeting. Everything else, the rest of the edits you see were edited as before. And so would just be interested to hear any feedback that you all may have, and whether or not you feel that this is something that you could potentially put on a future agenda for possible adoption or not.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Triesenberg. And if my recollection is correct, this came up when an item came before the council, when was it, several meetings ago, where there were issues about stub streets and the policy on them, and there was a request made to look at that as a result of some of the discussion from that hearing, as I recall. But at any rate, Council, you have before you what I believe is a good policy, and you have the information there that Mr. Triesenberg has presented to you. Questions for him at this time? Mr. Matthews, you have anything?
Not right yet, no, sir.
Okay, Mr. Vance, we'll go to you.
Questions?
Okay, Mr. Singleton.
No, sir, I'll wait for Mr. Dellinger to ask questions.
Okay. Well, I'll go to Mr. Behringer first, and then to, okay, Mr. Dellinger, sure enough.
So, first of all, I want to appreciate the effort made by the Public Works and staff to draft the policy. And what you've created are a set of quantitative measures that are meant to be objective. But what is missing is, and what you're trying to avoid, which is a qualitative opportunity for council to take into account factors that cannot be accounted for in these objective standards. And I said it before, I think we've done a very good job as a council when these issues have come before us of being able to listen to the public and deliberate about the best course forward, whether it be traffic calming or changing outlets and roads. And the way this policy is written would explicitly tie our hands to make those kind of decisions and deliberations. And to say in a policy, we have the ability to amend the policy, we always have the ability to amend the policy. We'll never do that on the fly, because one, that's not fair to the applicant. They want to have this policy as clear as possible. So my amendment as proposed, and I received multiple emails today, one last week, and some today, allow us to have a discussion about circumstances that cannot be foreseen or quantified. And I don't want to create a policy that ties our hands. We've had situations, I won't reference them, but I thought of one, I won't reference it explicitly, where we were tied by ordinance on what we could or could not do. And it's a difficult position to be in. And I don't want a council to adopt a policy that takes that deliberative function away from us and that advocacy for residents away from us. So that was the initial intent of the amendment. And for the fact created a lot of clarity that it's objective, council still needs a little latitude to address things on the fly that come outside of the edges of this policy so that we can respond to the public and their concerns. So my feedback, we're kind of back where we started.
Okay.
Well, I think what Mr. Dunner has stated is that I think a lot of this concern with stuff out, I know what staff has talked about, particularly with emergency services, where stub outs can cut down on travel time, response time. But then again, when we're connecting existing neighborhoods, whether they're newer existing neighborhoods or older neighborhoods, and we're going to a much denser use, that people do not prefer to have that happen. They didn't buy a home in a single-family neighborhood to be connected to a townhome neighborhood or a multifamily neighborhood. So that's a lot of it. And the potential increase in traffic. There are numbers in here, the 1,500, there was a number used about average daily trips. But again, is that a reasonable number? Is it, is there going to be specific cut through traffic? How much will it increase? People bought homes and thought it was going to be a quieter neighborhood. I understand policy can be changed every meeting we come in here. We can change the policy. We can override the policy in a meeting. But if you go through a SUP process and a developer or developers are told they should do this and the neighborhood may expect that, but then the neighborhood finds out they have a way to ask for some relief, then it's there. But I think what Mr. Dillon is just saying is if your hands are tied, you can only do so much. In this particular case, do we want to still leave that option out here as people do fill-in projects and connect newer development to older existing neighborhoods? Because that's where a lot of the problem. I go back to Cloverdale and Raleigh. We sure didn't have any trouble in nixing that, but and we did it for what we thought was a good reason. A neighborhood that was 50-plus years old being connected to a new project that was in Raleigh, and we had no trouble nixing that idea. But again, anything can be changed at a meeting. If on a condition like this, you can change it and add the condition, or ask the applicant to change it. If they don't, you just can either not approve the project, or you can continue the process until they do make a change. So there are ways around making them do things, whether you have a policy in place or not. But anyway, because again, it's just a policy, it's not the ordinance. I'm not going to get bent out of shape with this policy if we have it or not, to be honest with you, because when I look at a project, I vote on it each individual way, whether there's a policy in place or not.
Yeah, and that's, Mayor, yeah,
And I know you're looking for consistency, but the thing is that again, when you got a neighborhood that's 50 years old over here in Greenbrier, and somebody wants to put a whole heck of a lot of townhomes right in it and use those same streets, you have to understand that those people never expected that, never planned for that. And if it wasn't in the economy that we have here in Wake County now, we wouldn't have planned for that either, because you'd have thought it either been a business there that had been approved previously or other single-family homes. So the changing marketplace are putting condition changes in place that some people like and some people don't like. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, I think that's well stated. Some people like it, some don't. At the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, what we're trying to do here is approve a policy that gives clarity to the issue as planning deals with sensitive to the issues relating to stub streets and what problems they may or may not cause for emergency personnel and the whole factor of safety and those kinds of things. So it seems to me the council needs to either agree with Mr. Triesenberg that this policy is feasible to operate under, or if it's not, we need to give fairly explicit instructions of what changes we think would make it better or make it something that would be palatable in just about all the cases where it's become where it will become an issue.
And Mr. Mayor, I mean, the policy is a good policy. Everything that is written there, I agree with. There just needs to be another category for an exception that gives us some latitude as a council. That we don't want is to something to come before us and they say, well, this is the policy. They told us this was the policy, and we sit there and this place is full and people are saying, well, you can't do that because this, that, you know, it's a unique circumstance that isn't covered in the policy. And we say, oh, I'm sorry, that's the policy. We gotta, they gotta, you know, go with it. It was a simple amendment that gives us some latitude and discretion. And if a developer or home builder wants to come and take a chance that we'll give them an exemption, that's a big risk. I mean, that's a pretty significant risk they're trying to take when they're getting advice from our staff on what to do. I don't know that I would personally take that chance. But I think we have to preserve our deliberative function and our representation of, yeah. And
So Mr. Dellinger, just so I'll understand, are you proposing that we put specific language in the policy that gets at the issue that you're concerned about?
yeah, I presented that as an amendment before our last meeting
Yeah.
in one sentence.
Okay. I think at the time it was caught most people, we didn't have a chance to look at it.
And just for refresh, is to be added under exemptions as number 4, council exemptions and recommendations. The town council may also issue a waiver for stub completion, citing safety, quality of life, or other circumstances related to public interest, and/or evaluate and recommend appropriate traffic calming measures, which is basically what we've done on all these that have come before us before, is looked at safety and take into account emergency services and those limitations on even one of those projects on 401 and the gate and that kind of thing. That was the amendment.
I'll recognize staff or town manager or others who want to.
Yeah, and I know Jeff can speak for himself, but I think the dilemma that staff has is they need to know whether to tell developers whether they have to connect or not, and that changes the design, that changes the site plan. And if it's something that's going to be decided on a case-by-case basis, then, they may not want to have a policy and just if council is going to decide every time, they don't want to be in a position where they're telling them one thing and then come in here and it gets changed, which is your discretion, but that puts them in a position where, they're providing insufficient advice because they don't have the criteria to go on that they could stick to. So
At that point, that's with almost everything that comes before us. Staff can give them guidance on specific criteria as is laid out in the policy they've devised. But at the end of the day, it's the staff can give them direction on councils generally doesn't favor this or they don't do that. And some developers decide to go full steam ahead and say, oh, I'll take my chances, I can do this. And, that's.
yeah, I think part of the concern is with new development, we're getting all this new development now, and we've not really had all of that, is that any adjoining property could probably come up with some reasons why they wouldn't want to connect. So it's just, it's It's just not succinct.
Not every reason's not valid. We would determine and take staff's recommendation as well. It's not that they just come up with a reason and give it to us and we say, okay, you have an exemption. That's not how it would work. Like I said, I think we would agree with staff more often than not. And I think we have on the ones that have come before us and we expressed concern, they've taken that feedback and ended up with better, safer projects and connectivity and this policy. So again, I just want the council to preserve a level.
I think one way to ask the question might be, council already has that level of discretion now. Planning staff, by training and by planning theory, are going to always recommend stub connections. So at the end of the day, is there really a benefit to adding this policy? This was an exercise council asked us to look into. And I think staff has done very good work on it. But I'll be honest, the developers are going to read the last thing, and this is no comment about whether I agree with what you want to add or not, Mr. Dellinger. They're going to read that and say, oh, well, we can, let's figure out a way to work around this if they really want to. So no question about what you're proposing to add, but is there a benefit to even having the policy? Does it really add anything to the toolbox? And I'm not certain that we see whether it does or not because council already has the discretion that you're adding back at the end of the policy. So we're trying to figure out, does this really add value?
I think it adds a lot of value because it adds the quantitative measures that are helpful. And when it's not they just have to come up with any reason and, oh, well, council will get me staff can say, here's some other examples of where council has not, allowed an exemption for this. Yours is very similar to this one. They're probably not going to go for that. And that's, again, staff can do what they can to provide the guidance. It's up to them to make the decision as to whether or not they want to proceed. So I think the policy, like I said, the policy is good. I like the way it's worded. It has firm metrics and some objective stuff in it. Just need a little place so that we don't get caught in a position where we just say, oh, what's the policy? I'm sorry, we can't do anything.
I'm sorry.
You may want to see if Jeff has any
Well,
comments, if you don't mind.
and before I call on him, there are what, 11 municipalities or 12 in Wake County? Are we the only ones that are debating this issue? Are we outliers here, or what?
Probably not. Jeff probably could answer that. But
What
probably not.
information do we get from others who are dealing, I guess, with a similar thing? There's a lot of development going on in Wake County. We all acknowledge that. Jeff, I'll quit musing and have you comment at this point in time, whatever your thoughts are.
I mean, we haven't done an exhaustive survey of the other communities, so I can't speak for each and every one. But I do know that of the ones I've looked at, I'd say at least as of right now, of those that I've looked at, 2/3 probably have explicit statements that the stub just needs to be connected. End of story. And then they work with the design to mitigate the impacts as best they can, whether it's the street layout, proactive, traffic calming, or they have a traffic calming policy in place like we do, to try to address it after the fact as well. So yeah, I mean, I don't. I don't know that we would gain a whole lot. I don't know that we really lose anything either. So I can go, I think staff, we can go with it either way. But I would just kind of echo back, to the town attorney's comments last time, that it does kind of have a tendency to feel like it's swallowing the whole. So it does get down to the, practical implementations and the discussions at hand. I just know that there's you know, there can be a tendency, I think, for, you know, the one person who shows up, you know, and like I say, it just comes down to a matter of really talking about the issues at hand, and not just, you know, letting the squeaky wheel, you know, get the grease. So I think as long as we can approach, you know, continue to kind of approach that in this manner going forward, you know, we can see how the criteria work, and what kind of results and directions it gives, and if we're having, you know, major disagreements about it once projects come up for a vote. So yeah, I can go with it either way. Like I say, unless the town attorney has some ideas on how it could be worded slightly differently.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask her in just a minute, and maybe nobody else wants me to ask this, I don't know. But at any rate, as you deal with, you know, developers and others who are bringing plans to our town, and they're interested in building projects here, what's your sense of the kind of feedback you get as relates to these kinds of policies? I mean, I'm supposing that, you know, they're looking for some clarity and understanding that when it ultimately comes to council, there may be some further discussion, but I guess they're looking for something that is somewhat of a surety after they've laid out all their plans and spent money to draw up plans, et cetera, that they don't get caught at the last minute with a misunderstanding of what council may or may not do, given some flexibility of the policy.
Mr. Mayor,
I'm not sure I said that very well. Yes, sir, Mr. Matthew.
I'll make a comment. I'm sitting here taking all this in, and I'm trying to use a dangerous word. It's called common sense here, but let's roll with it. And the fact is, I think we all know at this board in this room, the older existing neighborhoods, they've been there a long time. A lot of people retired there. Some people got kids and families. They do not want to be stubbed into new neighborhoods. On the flip side of the coin, developers need to know ahead of time that if that's going to be an issue, I don't need to spend my time, money, and efforts creating stubs. This most likely we're going to have an issue with the neighborhoods going to pack the council chambers and what have you. So, in all fairness to developers, we need to develop something. It's not that complicated. If it's an older neighborhood, there's no stubs. And if it's a new neighborhood and it's drawn out and everybody knows potentially this is going to be connected, it's started drawing in on the drawings, and the developer knows that, and everybody that buys in it knows that it's going to connect over here. That's a whole separate issue. But bottom line, this whole thing is the older neighborhoods, for their reasons, which I respect, don't want to be stubbed. And the developers need to know that. So when they come in here or present a plan to our staff, they know what the deal is on the front side and be done with it. This cannot be that complicated to fix. Thank you, sir.
Other comments from other council members? Anybody? Well, let me go to Mr. Vance, see if he has anything.
Not at this moment, I don't have one.
I've been to multiple of these developer community meetings they have just out of sheer curiosity, and the reality is they don't want to connect most of the time. And they say, well, the town's making us do it. And the reality is, in a lot of instances, to get the project they want, they have to. They have to have the number of correct entrances and exits and all that stuff. And so this is something we want to do on the planning side, but developers want a little bit of flexibility. This policy doesn't give them a lot of flexibility. It gives them a shot in the dark to convince council that they deserve an exemption to connect. You see what I'm saying? So like, planning is going to get what they want most of the time for the connectivity. But again, we need to have that one opportunity to look at those individual circumstances and say, well, the numbers work, but this community has something we didn't think about. And again, there's a squeaky wheel, but there are also like hundreds, dozens sometimes, and they're legitimately squeaking. So My recommendation is sort of similar to what it was before, is to add that one council exemption recommendation. Senate.
Jones, I said I was going to come to you. If, any observations, comments you care to make?
My experience in working in multiple jurisdictions is that it's been a longstanding planning practice to have stub connections, and where developments were designed with stubs, the expectation was that there would be a future road connecting to that. Sometimes the stubs are providing road access to properties that would otherwise be landlocked. Now, I understand that people get an expectation that that road maybe is never going to connect, and maybe we don't want our neighborhood. And so the other alternative is to deal with the issues of trash trucks and school buses and delivery vans needing turning radius, is that instead of stubs, they're designed as temporary cul-de-sacs, which can be removed in the event of a future connection. That doesn't get to your goal of connectivity and, alleviating emergency response times and traffic planning, but ultimately it is your option as to how you want to do a policy. I just want to caution you that the default is that everything will connect. As you said, this was to create some common sense, rational exemptions. We can't connect because of wetlands. We can't get the permits. There were multiple stubs, but you don't need all of them. So there are distinct criteria in this. If you wanted to add another criteria, again, you'll just perhaps get some that petition for that. But again, like Mr. Dellinger said, I've read their comments about their community and neighborhood meetings, and you see a lot of those as like, well, the town is making us connect, bring that up to your council member, those kinds of things. So, the policy is a step in one direction. It is not the same as if it had been adopted in the UDO, where if you were delegating this responsibility to staff, it really has to be non-discretionary type decision-making, so parameters. So if this was to be a delegation in the UDO, having that kind of qualitative, discretionary, subjective standard really is not appropriate for a staff level decision. So as Mr. Triesenberg stated, this is a way to somewhat test the waters, to give developers some certainty, some parameters, so that they can better explain in the neighborhood meetings how a policy, how this policy may play out. But again, the general or the default position is that where a stub has been designed, it will connect in the future. When that future is, no one knows. But if not, do you want a lot of streets that don't meet turning radius and, that dead end, not the way that other cul-de-sacs are planned, to be able to accommodate trucks turning and school buses turning and things like that?
I don't know if this needs to be said, but to your point, when I left the office today, I went to an area where a citizen had sent me an email where they lived and said, please don't pass this policy. We don't want problems on our streets for our small kids, and so riding to this particular area, I could see, this person had a house at the end of a street that was stubbed. There was a lot of woods just beyond the house where that person lived. And so I don't know how long it's been that way. This is not an older neighborhood, but I could see how people would get accustomed to, the surroundings they have. But it seems to me, is, I'd like to think that most people who acquire property in a circumstance like that would know or should know that if there's a stub there, there is some likelihood that there's going to be a connection through there. Is that?
I think the
But
problem is our older neighborhoods, because
Yeah.
they bought them, they're narrow streets, there are no sidewalks, and now all of a sudden they're connecting to a neighborhood with sidewalks, and that's now connecting to a faster road. And so, again, my concern is this sort of familiarity you have about the safety of your neighborhood and street walkability changes overnight. And it's not safe for you to do what you did. You have new people who are zipping through the neighborhood. I mean, it's, again, we're not building new roads that end with no turning radius. These are all old roads. We've worked with them for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And new neighborhoods don't have the same problem. And Garner has some of the largest amount of old housing stock in neighborhoods in the county. So it's a unique problem for us. We don't have just new neighborhood on top of new neighborhood where it's like, yeah, in 3 years, that's going to be another phase of this project. So again, it's a unique problem to us. And I think, yeah, people should, you see a dead end road in your neighborhood, you know, that might open one day, but not necessarily understand the consequences of that. And I think that's why we have to express that concern, and they come here and express that concern for their safety. We have to have, I'm in favor of adopting the policy. I think it's helpful. We just need to add one sentence.
Just for clarification, so keep the edits as is and then add that sentence is what's under consideration?
I mean, I think we can remove the first edit about we can change the policy. It's a policy. We don't need in the policy to say we can change it. The other one about, I think we could keep the line about traffic calming at the staff level too, but I think that's also a thing that we have done and staff would probably present to us and agree with any traffic calming recommendations that staff might make. Like I said,
You'll provide us with the language you proposed?
We have it.
You have it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We just want,
I was trying to be, in it, I was trying to narrow the certain categories and not to be like blanket, council can issue an exemption, right? Parameters for us to, it's just, so it was trying to narrow it down a little bit. If we want to take out quality of life, that's fine.
just want to clarify what we need to bring back, I imagine for the consent agenda at a later time.
Sounds reasonable. I mean, I heard, I heard Mr. Dellinger say he in general approves the policy. I think that's the consensus of the other council members here, but let me hear from you to make sure. He is anxious to have this amended sentence be placed into the policy. Is that correct, Mr. Dellinger?
Preference, but.
Okay.
Number 4.
I don't think I have it in front of me. I probably had it when you gave it to me the last time, but the council members are aware of what he's proposing in general. Okay. So, unless you want to spend more time on it, I think I've heard a proposal from staff that this can be brought back with the amended sentence or paragraph, whatever it is, and with the policy on the consent agenda for approval. Council, am I hearing wrong from anybody? Okay, so Mr. Triesenberg, the town manager, and whoever else needs to be involved will get together with you, and we'll bring this back at a future meeting for a vote. Consent agenda.
That sounds good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, council.
Good debate.
Okay, yes. I'm prepared to go ahead and proceed with probably finishing our agenda, but if council desires to take a brief recess, I'll be sensitive to your needs in that regard. Anybody?
Mr. Mayor. Closer to him.
Okay. All right.
I have 2 reports, so.
Okay,
should go
well, I'll
quick.
recognize the town manager for reports.
So one is the pending agenda that you have in here already and looked over, hopefully. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is police will have its annual National Night Out, and that is August the 2nd from 5 to 8 p.m. in the Cabela's parking lot. And as you remember, we used to do that every year, and we spread it out and had it in different locations throughout Garner. So bringing that back. So invite the public and everyone to come out and, you know, learn more about the police and, you know, safety and those type of things. So,
Okay,
What was that date again, just to make sure?
August 2nd.
August the 2nd,
Okay, so
And I would
which
say,
is a Tuesday, so that'll be, we have a
Yeah.
meeting on August the 1st, so, yeah.
I'm sure probably all council members have been to those. If you haven't, I would encourage you to tonight to intermingle with other citizens and appreciate the purpose of the National Night Out for sure.
I have one quick
Yeah.
question on the upcoming agenda. For the first, there's a lot for one night. How long are you anticipating each of those items to take? There are 3 public hearings and 4
New business.
like projects. What is sort of the expectation?
May have Jeff answer that, because some of these you've heard before, so
Right,
I'll let
those
Jeff
to kind of blur together. a
talk
little
about
bit.
which ones,
I mean, we wouldn't be able to move the public hearings, but the old and new business, I'm not sure how much time those are going to take. And I noticed our agenda on the 16th is a little leaner, but I just didn't know if those were large, complicated projects or if they were small, one-off sort of zoning things.
Jeff, were we asking for his comment?
He's joining back now.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Yes, 2 of those that are coming back for new old business should be fairly straightforward. One is just a textual rezoning, no plans. The other one is the White Oak storage, which I think is fairly straightforward. The only one that's maybe not as straightforward would be the Bennett assemblage, but most of that has been, I think, worked out, and the debate on that, I think, can be kept pretty succinct. So yeah, I don't anticipate a lot of time for those.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Manager?
no, that's all I had.
And let's see, anything from you, Ms. Jones?
No, a placeholder had been put on the agenda for a closed session. I recently emailed you about 2 lawsuits. If you want to discuss those, we can have that, but otherwise, I don't have anything additional to report to you on those lawsuits at this time.
So wants to do that, but anything from the assistant managers?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, all right. All right, well, let's go to council reports. Start to my left with Mr. Matthews.
Nothing this time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Yes, so Mr. Jones is here. I want to thank him and Public Works for the work, the storm cleanup. That was taking time, busy summer. I told my son as we watched him clean up in front of on our cul-de-sac last week that, you know, the dry weather may have benefited you somewhat. It may have slowed down some of your grass cutting and you'll be able to do this, but this is still not scheduled. So it's, thank y'all for the work that you've done to do that. I'm sure you'll get us some numbers at the end of what you picked up. We had an email from Mr. Jones. As a matter of fact, we talked about the electric vehicles and so forth. And I was wondering if that's possible, it could be added to maybe the August work session, some discussion. That raises as many questions as it answers. I read the email numerous times. It's got a lot of questions about what you're doing, the commitments
Sure,
you make, so forth and so on.
We'll look at the August work session. I know we got some things coming up on that, and give you more information on, yeah. We've
It needs to
been
be
having
another
some
meeting, that's
discussion
fine,
with the
but
mayor.
I just think we need to
Yeah.
get a lot of questions answered.
And I'll just comment, Ms. Singleton, that I had spoken with the town manager some time back and expressed an interest in, I didn't intend for this to all of a sudden just, you know, talk about electric vehicles and how we can change our fleet and those kinds of things. That's an element of it. But I was thinking in more general terms of maybe appointing or creating almost what I'd call a sustainability committee that would be long-range looking and not just focus strictly on what we would do with our fleets, but things, even as we create these parks and start thinking about what infrastructure we're going to put in those to have accessibility for electric vehicles that are out there already. Some, maybe not as much, but
You know, Mr. Mayor, you brought a good point up there, and I know like when I talk to forest or the police or the fire department, they talk to their counterparts all over everywhere that are already testing this, and they're getting feedback, good, the bad, and ugly, I guess is the best way to put it. And it'd be good to hear, like Grace said, them come in and tell us what all the other community, rather than before we invest, let's find out what the real story is.
well,
out
sure,
there.
yeah. And again, I mean, I think it's a discussion about, the immediate, but not necessarily the immediate, but looking long-term of some things we as a town, and we hear of other towns are doing some stuff in this area. So I think we'd just be wise to, whether it's a committee or something else, to look at the range of things that we might look at that are changing in our society almost daily.
We had planned to have some discussion on alternative vehicles as part of one of our topics there on the work session anyway, as some possibilities. So we can expand that conversation if we need to.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Berringer.
Just one thing, sir. I believe I mentioned at a previous meeting about some of the traffic islands or medians around town being broken and cracked and ends of them. Whose responsibility is it to repair those? What do we do with that? Point is out Bandora Springs Road, the off ramp on 70 from Bandora Springs Road, but also broken there at 50 and getting there in the middle needs to be mowed, and I'm just wondering if it would be less, I mean, it has to be mowed regularly. Would it be less troublesome just to make it?
So I'll go back to your last one at the end. So the responsibility of the repair of all those medians you've referenced is DOT. We had reached out to our contact with the division office several months ago when you first reported this to us and kind of made them aware, and the feedback we received at the time from them was it is something they would place on their list for us and give to one of their contractors, and also recognize at that same time with us that their contractor was fairly backed up, and they would prioritize it into their work schedule, but that was probably just being honest. And I think they were trying to be realistic with their expectations, was probably not a high priority for them at this time. So I think which is evidenced by the slowed or delayed response.
So we really don't know when it might happen.
I pressed for a timeline, and that's because we said, hey, we can put it on our list. Our contractor is backed up, and I kind of went back and said, well, where are we with the timeline? And he said, truthfully, it's lower on the list. And your last place you mentioned was on Highway 50 at. Yes, there is a small patch of that is infield with dirt and grass. Yes, again, that would be up to them to kind of come back in and cap that off. Probably lower.
You can't create miracles. I'm just wondering what it would take.
And I would say, worked in recent years to establish some good relationships with our division office with DOT, and there's items they've been more responsive on than others. So I think the good news is I think they're responding to us and being relatively, very giving us good feedback. So I mean about where it is in their priority when it's lower, hey, we'll see this. And an example I gave them a couple weeks ago said, yeah, we'll give that to one of our contractors, and they were hoping to be done with something in a few weeks. So
while we're on that topic, I know this is not in our jurisdiction, but Dickens Road, all of those medians, they haven't been mowed. They're concrete medians, but the weeds have come up through the cracks, and both on the
We'll send them a note on that. And that is a different group that, I mean, still DOT, but more their roadside environmental group that handles that, so we'll pass that along to them. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Dellinger, a report, council report?
Inquiry on, I know we've talked about signs down near 401, and there's some work with a developer or something, but I've had multiple people in the past few weeks not know that was Garner. They all think they're in Fuquay, and it drives me crazy that they don't know that the Costco's in Garner. They don't know they're passing through Garner. Fuquay's got signs on every time you cross into their town limits. What does it take to get those signs that say, "Welcome to Garner"? Simple metal sign on the opposite side of where it says Fuquay, so that people know Garner is down there. I mean,
Yeah, we should be able to do something with that.
I think losing tens of thousands of eyes that go down those roads every day, they need to know they're in Garner.
If it's just the simple median signs, yes. I know we had made an attempt to get a welcome to Garner sign, but I don't think that worked out yet. But yeah.
Get those signs on the side of 1010 and 401 so people can see the name Garner down there. Again, it's literally tens of thousands of people a day driving through there, and they need to see our name.
We'll work on that. I don't know if we have to get DOT permission to put those in the right of way or what, how that process goes. So it may not be immediate, but we'll check into it.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Vance.
I would say great job to the staff in working on the application for the for us to receive the $1 million plus for the improvements of Rand Mill Road, along with the additional parking that's going to be available to us. I think that was a great achievement. And I'd like to also thank Congresswoman Ross for her hard work and diligence to make sure that our needs are being met here in Garner and fighting for Garner in DC. That's all I have.
Thanks, sir. You stole my thunder. I was gonna.
A little bit more.
Okay,
Also
go
want to
ahead.
thank staff for the great setup they had when she was out there. It was very welcoming. It was a good little event, and so.
Yeah, it's always good when we can get a congressional member to come to our town and to give us a big check for $1 million. We'll do it. Okay, I don't have anything else. So you heard Ms. Jones' comment earlier about the closed session. I don't sense that council is desirous of going into closed session, or am I wrong on that? You saw the information she submitted, so I'm sure we can get a report at a future time if we need to. Okay, we're good? All right, I believe we're ready for a motion to, excuse me, do you have anything else, John?
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to add one thing for council members who weren't there Friday. Congresswoman Ross did also announce that a more recent application we made for $500,000 for senior center improvements did make it into the final House package that is going to the Appropriations Committee. So that was new news that she shared with the group on Friday. So now that'll await the federal budget process and consensus from the Senate.
That was some upgrades for the senior center.
Yes, sir.
I meant to text you Friday morning and tell you I couldn't came, but something came up Friday morning that was work related, and I forgot. Sorry.
We packaged, when Congresswoman Ross made us aware of another round of funding, staff got together and packaged all the perform items and some other improvements that we knew that could benefit the senior center into a package and submitted that. So it totaled about $500,000.
So if I may add on, it was mentioned that asked to contact our senators to let them know to support this endeavor.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, thank you all for your indulgence, those of you who are out there and still part of our audience this time of night. Hearing no other need for further action, I will entertain a motion that we adjourn.
So moved. So moved. Second.
For the motion, all in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, no? Okay, thank you. I declare this work session of the town council to be adjourned. See you at our next meeting in
Up here for Joyce
August,
Stevens.
which is not too far away.
It's next Monday, Mayor.